Sir, we need to search your property for illegal aliens. Step
Son,
out.
it's 7 in the morning. Ain't nobody in that house but my cat, and she ain't undocumented.
Sir, this is not a joke. Step aside.
Call your supervisor now before y'all get embarrassed.
We have federal authority.
Boy, what road you think you're on?
The body camera footage from Agent Hondo, the only one running correctly that morning, opens on red Georgia clay, a gate that has been cut open rather than unlocked, and 4 tactical vehicles rolling single file down a dirt road flanked by the kind of old-growth pecan trees that take 60 years to look like that. It is 7:14 a.m. The light is the particular gold of a southern morning that hasn't decided yet whether it's going to be beautiful or brutal. A rooster somewhere off camera has opinions about the intrusion and is voicing them. At the end of the road, standing on his porch with a coffee mug and the expression of a man who has never once in his life been rushed by anything, is Felix Broadman, 68 years old, overalls, work boots that have seen 4 decades of this specific soil, a face so weathered and unbothered it looks like the land grew it. He watches the vehicle stop. He sips his coffee. Agent Tom Suarez is out first, 31 years old, vest tight, moving with the kinetic energy of a man who practiced this entrance in his head on the drive over. Behind him, Agents John and Millard Burke fan out across the yard. A 4th agent stays at the vehicle. There are weapons visible. There is a battering ram in the trek bed that, as it turns out, will never touch a single door on this property. Suarez reaches the porch steps. Uncle Fel hasn't moved. "Sir, we need to search your property," he yells. Uncle Fel is unbothered. He advises Agent Suarez to call his supervisor before things go south for them, but he refuses, insisting on searching the property. 5 minutes later, he will wish with everything in him that he had made that call.
Okay, let's talk about what actually just happened on that porch. Because on the surface, this looks like a story about a government mistake. Wrong address, wrong farm, wrong man. File a complaint, issue an apology, everybody goes home. That's the version Tom Suarez was counting on when he drove away that morning. What he didn't know, and what makes this a true story worth 30 minutes of your time, is that Felix Broadman is not the kind of man who lets an apology close a chapter that was never actually finished. And the mistake Suarez made wasn't just a typo on a warrant. It was one address digit sitting on top of 94 years of a black family holding on the land that an entire system spent decades trying to take from them by any means necessary. You cut that fence, son. You drove those trucks down that lane. You stood on that porch like you owned something that has had the same family's name on the deed since 1931. The impossible discovery that unravels everything Suarez thought he was protected by, it was already registered at the county clerk's office before Tom Suarez's father was born. Stick with this, because the 5 minutes after Uncle Fel said you need to call your supervisor are some of the most specifically satisfying 5 minutes in the history of a federal agent realizing live, on camera, on someone else's property, that they are cooked.
If you're enjoying this story already, kindly hit the subscribe button and like this video. Felix Broadman did not become Uncle Fel by accident. That name was earned the way all the good names are, through decades of showing up for people who needed it, on land that was always more than just farmland. His grandfather, James Elton Broadman, purchased 340 acres of red clay farmland in Meriwether County, Georgia in 1931, 2 years into the Depression, during a period when black land ownership in the rural South was less a legal right and more a dare. James bought it anyway. He had the survey done by a county assessor who charged him 3 times the going rate and assumed he wouldn't be back in a generation. He was wrong. The Broadmans have been on Callaway Lane every single year since. Felix inherited the farm at 27 when his father passed. He'd been working it since he was 9. He expanded the pecan orchards, added a heritage corn crop that a state agricultural university has been studying for 12 years, and built a community feeding program that has put food on tables across 4 counties without once appearing on a government grant list. He did it himself, with his hands, on his land. 4 years before this story takes place, a sitting U.S. congressman stood at a ceremony on Callaway Lane and personally presented Felix Broadman with a federal agricultural heritage preservation designation, one of fewer than 200 issued in the entire country. The certificate is framed in the hallway of the farmhouse between a photograph of his grandfather breaking ground in 1931 and a photograph of Felix at his granddaughter's college graduation. The county calls him Uncle Fel. The agricultural university calls him a living repository of heritage farming knowledge. The federal government, or the part of it that knew who he was, called his land protected. The part of the federal government that showed up at 7:14 a.m. with a battering ram called him a person of interest. Now, Tom Suarez. Suarez had been with the agency's Atlanta field office for 3 years. Before that, 2 years with a contractor security firm that specialized in detention facility operations. The kind of resume line that tells you something about a man's relationship to the word compliance. His field reviews use phrases like high initiative and operationally aggressive, which in that office's particular dialect meant he moved fast, asked questions later, and had not yet been wrong in a way that cost anyone important anything. He had 3 use of force reports in 26 months, all reviewed by Field Supervisor Kenneth Wallace. All closed with the notation, within operational parameters. Wallace had a clearance rate that made the regional director happy and a review process that made accountability functionally impossible, which is a long way of saying the office had accidentally built a machine for producing agents who believed consequence was something that happened to other people. The warrant Suarez executed that morning had been processed in 38 hours, fast by any standard. Too fast, as it turned out, for anyone to notice that the address on the tip read 4412 Callaway Road, and the address on the warrant read 4412 Callaway Road. And the address of the actual subject of the investigation was, correctly, 4412 Callaway Road. Felix Broadman's farm is on Callaway Lane. Road and lane. In Meriwether County, Georgia, those are 2 different roads, 1.4 miles apart, running roughly parallel through farmland that all look similar from a satellite image if you're moving fast and not looking for the difference. Suarez was moving fast. He was not looking for the difference. He had also, and this is the part that will matter enormously in about 4 paragraphs, not read the non-interference notice that ICE's own legal division had filed 6 weeks earlier regarding federally designated agricultural heritage properties in the Meriwether County corridor. That notice had Felix Broadman's property coordinates in it, his name, his designation number. It said in the specific language of federal interagency communication, do not enter without written clearance from the Agricultural Heritage Office. It had been sitting in the Atlanta field office's shared legal folder since October, unread, like a bill you keep moving to the other side of the desk. Here is what the footage shows, in order. And there is a lot of footage, because Felix Broadman has had security cameras on Callaway Lane since 2019, after a property line dispute with a neighboring developer that went to county court and that Felix won in 11 days flat. The cameras are good ones, motion-activated, time-stamped, cloud-backed, the kind that a man installs when he has learned, at 64, that documentation is the only language certain institutions reliably understand. At 6:58 a.m., 4 government vehicles turn off the county road onto Callaway Lane. The lead vehicle passes the property marker, a white post with the county parcel number and the Broadman name on a metal plate, without slowing. The marker has been in the same position since 1947. It is not subtle. It is not hidden. It is a white post with a name on it. At 7:02 a.m., Agent John exits the second vehicle and cuts the chain on the entrance gate. Not a lockpick, not a key request, a bolt cutter applied to a gate that has a clearly visible property deed number engraved on the latch plate, a detail Felix's attorney, Jeffrey Ramirez, will later describe in his filing as either an act of willful disregard or a level of operational carelessness that amounts to the same thing. At 7:09 a.m., the vehicles reach the farmhouse. Hondo's cam body is the only one properly activated. Suarez's camera shows a 4-minute gap from vehicle exit to first porch contact. In that 4 minutes, Suarez walked past 3 things that should have stopped him cold: the property deed plaque mounted beside the front door, the Federal Agricultural Heritage designation marker staked near the Cacan Orchard entrance, and a hand-painted sign on the fence post that read, in letters large enough to read from a moving vehicle, Broadman Farm, Est 1931. He walked past all 3. His camera was off for all 3. What Hondo's camera catches from 30 feet back is the full porch exchange, and what it catches after Uncle Fel says, "What road do you think you're on?" is a silence that has a specific texture, the silence of a man beginning to feel the floor shift but not yet willing to admit it. Suarez pulls out the warrant. He reads the address aloud, 4412 Callaway Road. Uncle Fel doesn't raise his voice. He does something worse. He smiles, the patient, almost sorry smile of a man watching someone walk toward a hole he can already see from where he's standing. He reaches into his back pocket and produces his wallet. From the wallet, he removes a card, laminated, creased from years of living in that exact pocket. It is his county property registration card. It has been in his wallet since 1987. He holds it up next to the warrant. His address, 4412 Callaway Lane. The warrant address, 4412 Callaway Road. One word. Suarez stares at it. The rooster is still going. A pecan tree drops something in the orchard. Somewhere in the farmhouse, the cat, who is genuinely not undocumented, knocks something off a shelf. Suarez makes a decision at this moment that federal investigators will later describe with the weary precision of people who have seen this before as a compounding error. Instead of stopping, verifying, and withdrawing, which is the legally required response when a subject produces contradicting documentation, he tells Uncle Fel that the discrepancy is under review, and that the agents will need to complete their sweep of the property before anything can be confirmed. He tells a 68-year-old man on land his family has owned for 94 years that the government needs to look around first and figure out if they have the right place. Uncle Fel looks at him for a long moment. Then he reaches inside the front door and picks up his phone. He does not call 911. He does not call a lawyer. He calls a number that is saved in his phone under a name that, when Suarez eventually learns what it is, will drain the color out of his face faster than anything that happened on that porch.
The number Uncle Fel called belonged to Renee Stansel. Renee Stansel is the Deputy Director of the USDA's Agricultural Heritage Preservation Office Southeast Region. She and Felix Broadman have known each other for 11 years, since she was a field assessor who came to Callaway Lane to evaluate the heritage corn crop and stayed for 4 hours because she had never seen anything like it. She attended the designation ceremony 4 years ago. She has been to the farm for Thanksgiving twice. She also, and this is the part that makes the whole thing almost cosmically tidy, was the signatory on the non-interference notice that ICE's Atlanta field office had been ignoring in their shared legal folder since October. Her name, her signature, her notice, sitting unread in the same office that sent 4 vehicles to cut Felix Broadman's gate at 7 in the morning. Renee picked up on the second ring. Uncle Fel, in the calmest voice you have ever heard from a man with federal agents on his porch, said, "Renee, baby, I need you to tell me the designation number on my property notice." She told him. He repeated it aloud, clearly facing Suarez. Then he said, "Now can you tell me what agency is required to obtain written clearance from your office before entering this property under any enforcement action?" Renee said the agency's name. Felix looked at Suarez's vest, at the letters on it, back at Suarez's face. The rooster had gone quiet by this point. Even the rooster understood. What happened in the next 90 seconds is captured in full on Hondo's body cam and on 2 of Felix's property cameras simultaneously, which means it was documented from 3 angles and later reviewed by investigators, who described the sequence in an official federal report in writing as a rapid and visible deterioration of operational confidence, which is the government's way of saying those agents left that porch fast. Suarez got back on his radio. The voice that came back from his supervisor, Kenneth Wallace, had a quality to it that Hondo's audio forensics team would later describe as consistent with a person receiving information they were not prepared to receive. Wallace had just been told by his own legal division that the non-interference notice existed, that it had been in the shared folder since October, that it had Renee Stansel's name on it, that Renee Stansel was currently on the phone with the property owner whose gate they had just cut with a bolt cutter at 7 in the morning. Wallace told Suarez to stand down and exit the property immediately. Suarez told his team to move back to the vehicles.
Uncle Fel stood on his porch and watched them go. He had picked his coffee mug back up. He finished it while they turned the vehicles around in his driveway, a 12-point turn situation, because the lead vehicle had pulled up too close to the barn, which is a metaphor so perfect it feels almost scripted. As the last vehicle cleared the gate with the cut chain now hanging open, Felix called after them, not angry, almost conversational. "Y'all gonna need to fix that gate now. That chain been on there since 1987, Uncle Fel said. Nobody answered. The dust settled back onto Callaway Lane. Renee Stansel was already on a second call. The DOJ complaint landed 19 days after the raid. Attorney Jeffrey Ramirez filed it on behalf of Felix Broadman, and it was, by any professional measure, a document built like a brick wall. Every claim sourced, time-stamped, cross-referenced, and supported by evidence that the defendants themselves had generated. The claims were surgical: unlawful entry onto federally designated protected property, destruction of private property, the gate chain, valued at $340, which became the most expensive $340 in Tom Suarez's career, violation of the Interagency Non-Interference Protocol, falsification of the post-raid incident report, which described the property entry as lawful and conducted within operational parameters without mentioning the address discrepancy, the property designation, or the existence of the non-interference notice, and a pattern of supervisory negligence by Kenneth Wallace that had allowed 3 prior use-of-force incidents to proceed without meaningful review. The incident report issue deserves its own moment, because Suarez, in the hours after retreating down Callaway Lane, had written a report that described the operation as a routine enforcement action that was peacefully concluded upon review of additional property documentation. No mention of the address error, no mention of Renee Stansel, no mention of the non-interference notice or the fact that it had been sitting in the office's own legal folder since October. Then, investigators pulled the office's shared legal folder access logs. 14 agents had opened that folder in the 6 weeks since the notice was filed. The notice itself had been accessed twice, once by a paralegal named Shirley Kincaid, who had flagged it with a comment that read, "Does anyone know if this affects the Meriwether County operations?" and once, 4 days before the raid, by Kenneth Wallace himself. Wallace had opened it, read it, closed it, and approved Suarez's operation the following morning without a word. That access log timestamp, Wallace opening the non-interference notice at 4:47 p.m. on a Wednesday and approving the raid authorization at 9:22 a.m. Thursday, became the architectural center of the entire federal case. It transformed a story about a wrong address into a story about deliberate institutional disregard. Not negligence, not oversight. A supervisor who read the notice, understood what it meant, and sent 4 vehicles down Callaway Lane anyway. Shirley Kincaid, the paralegal who had flagged the notice and received no response, became the government's most valuable cooperating witness. She had kept a screenshot of her unanswered comment. She had kept it in a personal folder on her work computer for 6 weeks, not knowing why, just knowing that the non-response felt wrong in the specific way that things feel wrong when you're the lowest ranked person in a room and you've just said something true that nobody wants to hear. She gave it to investigators on a Tuesday afternoon. By Wednesday morning, it was the first exhibit in Ramirez's amended complaint. Suarez was terminated 8 weeks after the raid. The termination letter cited the address error, the post-raid report falsification, the body cam activation failure, and, specifically by name, his decision to continue the operation after Felix Broadman produced contradicting documentation. The letter used the phrase, "conscious disregard of exculpatory evidence presented at the scene." That phrase, in a federal termination letter, is not an accident. That phrase is a legal team making sure the record says exactly what happened. John, who had cut the gate, received a formal suspension and mandatory retraining. Burke, who had been on scene, was transferred and placed under supervised field duty. Kenneth Wallace was removed from supervisory authority, formally demoted, and referred to the DOJ's Office of Professional Responsibility for the access log incident. His career, as a practical matter, ended at 4:47 p.m. on the Wednesday he opened that notice and decided it was someone else's problem. The settlement came at 5 months. The figure was not disclosed publicly at Felix's specific request. He said in a statement that the number wasn't the point, and that he didn't want the story reduced to a dollar amount. What was disclosed, the agency was required to implement mandatory address verification protocols for all warrant executions, mandatory review of active interagency non-interference notices before any field operation in the covered zones, and a formal written apology signed by the regional director delivered to Felix Broadman at Callaway Lane. The regional director drove out himself. Felix made him coffee. He did not offer to fix the man's 12-point turn situation in the driveway. Some lessons you let people find on their own. 6 months after 4 government vehicles rolled down Callaway Lane, Felix Broadman hosted the annual community harvest gathering he has run every October for the last 19 years. 40-something people, long tables set up under the pecan trees. The heritage corn, the same crop that Renee Stansel's office has been studying for a decade, served 3 different ways because Uncle Fel believes a thing worth growing is worth eating properly. Renee came. She brought her field team. They sat at the same tables as the neighbors, the county commissioner, the pastor from the AME church down the road, and a professor from the agricultural university who has been coming to this gathering since 2016 and who once wrote in a journal article that Callaway Lane represented a living argument against the myth that black land ownership in the rural South was a historical anomaly rather than a sustained act of resistance. Nobody gave a speech about what had happened in April. Nobody needed to. The gate had a new chain on it, heavier gauge than the original because Felix had decided that if the government was paying for a replacement, he was upgrading. The property marker at the lane entrance had been cleaned and remounted at a height that was, in Felix's words, harder to miss if you're not trying to miss it. At some point in the evening, someone asked Uncle Fel if he was angry. He thought about it for a genuine moment, not performing consideration, actually considering it. He said, "Anger takes energy I need for other things. My grandfather was angrier than I'll ever have reason to be, and he still got up and bought this land. I figure the least I can do is keep it." Then he went back to making sure everyone had enough to eat. The pecan trees were heavy that year. 40-year-old trees do that when the season is right. They just give everything they have, unhurried, unbothered, rooted in ground that remembers every single thing that has ever happened on it. Callaway Lane was quiet, the way it has been and intends to remain since 1931. Here's what I need you to sit with for a second. Felix Broadman did not win because he got loud. He did not win because he had connections or money or a team of people working on his behalf before any of this happened. He won because in 1931, his grandfather bought land and got a survey done, and every generation of that family since kept the documentation, the deed, the designation, the laminated card in the wallet, because they understood something about this country that too many people learned too late. The ones who want what you have are counting on you not being able to prove it's yours. Uncle Fel could prove it. He could prove it 6 different ways before his coffee went cold. Share this with someone who needs to hear that accountability is still possible and that sometimes the most powerful thing in a confrontation with authority is a laminated card and the patience of a man who has been ready for this moment his entire life. Click the subscribe button now because the next story will blow your mind.